Hi, my name is Jane, and today I'm going to show you how to make a super quick and easy quilted placemat. So here in front of me, I've gone ahead and prepared my space with everything I need. So I've cut out the pieces of fabric I need and the batting for the placemat. I've also got my sewing machine set up here with my walking foot. If you don't have a walking foot, that's totally okay. It looks like this. One might have come with your sewing machine. If not, you can order them on Amazon really easily, but it just helps the two pieces of fabric with the batting go more smoothly through the machine. It just makes it easier when you're doing a thick piece. So that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting together my sandwich, which will be the piece we are quilting. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is prepare what is called the quilt sandwich, and this is made up of your two pieces of fabric with the batting in between them. So the larger piece of fabric is going to go print side down on your table or your cutting mat, whatever surface you are using, and then your batting will go in between as the middle layer, and then your second smaller piece of fabric will go on the top. And then as you're putting this together, you're gonna wanna use a ruler just to measure around the outside to make sure your smaller piece of fabric and the batting are centered about 1.5 inches on every edge, because this outer edge is going to be your binding. So when you get to that step, you're really gonna want that to be even around the outside. And then if you have basting spray, as you're doing this, you can baste these together. So that just means putting a spray of the basting spray in between each layer. I don't have any, so what I'm gonna do is just stick a few pins in here to hold it in place. And you'll also find that working with the cotton batting and cotton fabric, it kind of sticks together on its own. So it's not gonna slip a whole lot, even if you don't have the basting spray, that's gonna be totally fine. So once you have your quilt sandwich ready to go, the next thing you're gonna do is mark where you're gonna quilt. So for this, I'm just doing straight lines. So I'm gonna use this ruler to measure 2 inches in from the start of the smaller piece of fabric, and I'm gonna use it to create 2 rectangles inside of my quilt sandwich. And I'm just using chalk to mark those, and this is gonna wash off. So 2 inches from the outsides on both sides. And then we'll come right here, line that up, and do the same thing. And we'll go all the way around. And then my next rectangle I'm gonna draw with my chalk, I'm gonna do 1.5 inches inside of the first one I did. So I have that measured here with my ruler, and I'll go ahead and draw that. You can use chalk, or you can use an invisible ink marker for fabric, and this will wash right out once you wash your placemat for the first time, so you don't really have to worry about having the line there, but you're gonna want it when you are quilting. It makes it way easier to have a marked line for you to follow. Okay, so now I have my sandwich put together and my lines marked with chalk, so I'm ready to start quilting. And what I'm going to do is just sew exactly along these blue lines in these 2 rectangles. So it's super easy, so we will go do that now. So as I start sewing this, I have my needle lined up with the corner of the larger outside rectangle, and I'm going to put a few stitches in and then actually do a few back stitches. The back stitch button is a little arrow loop, and this will just help hold it in place. So once I do my little back stitches, then I will go ahead and sew all the way along that line. Okay, so then when you get to your first corner, you're going to just lift up your presser foot, rotate your fabric, make sure it's still lined up with this line here to then sew down, and just put your presser foot back down, and then keep going around every corner. You'll do that same thing. So now I am nearing the end right where I started. So when I get to that corner, just to make sure it's really secure, I'm actually going to turn it one more time, do a couple of stitches over where I started, and then do a couple back stitches just to make sure it doesn't come out when you're washing it. And then I'm going to take it out and trim my threads, and then move on to the inner rectangle and do exactly the same thing. So again, as I'm starting my inner rectangle, I have put a couple stitches in. I'm going to do a couple back stitches to make sure that holds in place really well, and then continue on and go all the way around just like before. Something important to remember as you're turning your corners, when you get to the corner, you want to pick the presser foot up, but make sure to leave your needle down. That way when you turn, you don't totally move the fabric out. It'll stay exactly where your last stitch was. So just the presser foot with the lever and leave the needle down and ready to sew. And then once you turn, you can just keep on going. Okay, so now that we have finished sewing these two rectangles, which is the quilted part of your placemat, the last step is to bind it. And just to show you, if you have used chalk or something on the front and it's hard to see, here's the back, and this is what it's gonna look like when the chalk or the marker is washed off. So you'll have a really nice quilted rectangle on there. And then I personally really like, after you've washed it and dried it, it does the kind of crinkly thing and makes it look more like a quilt. So that is exciting to see when it comes out of the washer as well. So we are using the backing fabric as our binding, just as a fold over method. So what you are going to do is take your back fabric and fold it so the raw edge here lines up with the raw edge of your batting and your top fabric all the way across. And then you're going to fold it over one more time, just directly over, so that you get a nice edge along here. And you can go ahead and pin this in place. I also like to use an iron to press mine before I sew it, just so it's really flat. It makes it a lot easier to sew. And for this, I've done a pretty thick binding just because it's easier to work with, especially if this is your first time doing binding. But if you don't want it to be quite this thick, you could trim it down a little bit. You just want to make sure that you're able to fold it over twice to get that nice edge. So once you get to the corner, what you're going to do is just fold in right here and have this meet that raw edge right there. So just a fold here, and then holding that with one hand, you're going to do the same thing you did along the other edge. On this edge, fold it over once, and then fold it over again. And when you do that in the corner, that's what's going to give you this nice corner. So we can go ahead and pin that in place, and then pin all the way along this side as well. And I'll show that one more time as we go around, because that's definitely the trickiest part, is getting the corner lined up. So here again, we've reached the corner, and we're going to fold the corner in like this, and then along this edge, while still holding this down, go ahead and make that one fold in, and then a second fold over to create that nice corner and pin it in place. Okay, so here I am just pinning the final corner. I'm gonna put one more pin in the middle here, and then I'm gonna press it really quick with an iron just to make it really flat as I sew around. And I always joke with everyone that I am the least precise quilter ever, because I've just found in my experience that usually, even if something isn't super precise, it's still gonna come out okay. Once it's sewn, once it's washed and dried, if there's a line that's not totally straight, if something's a little bit off, you usually can't really tell. So don't worry too much about, your corners being perfect or this being super straight. because once it is done, it's still gonna look great. So now I have pressed around the outside of my binding to make it flat and easier to sew. And the last thing I'm gonna do is just sew all the way around. I am not super precise, so what I like to do is just pick a spot close to the edge of the binding. For this, I'm just gonna line up the edge of my presser foot with the edge of the binding. That way I can easily go straight. So I'll go ahead and put my needle down and start sewing along here. And you just wanna keep it even no matter how far in you decide to sew. And then as you reach your pins, you can pull them out. Okay, so as I'm approaching this last corner, I am going to do the same thing, turn the corner, sew a little bit over where I started, and then do a few back stitches before I pick it up, and that will just make sure that it is held in place really well as it goes through the washer and dryer. You won't have it unraveling on you. So now you can trim these last threads. And you are ready, make sure your pins are out, and you are ready to wash and dry your placemat. So I'm gonna do that and then let you know what it looks like. So here is our finished product. It has been washed and dried now, so you can see it's kind of doing this crinkly thing I talked about that makes it look more like a quilt. You can see all the chalk came out as well, leaving us with these nice lines. So there's the front and the back. And this is just a really basic project. It's really quick and easy just to give you the basic quilting skills. And then once you develop these, it really opens the door to do more. Here's an example of another placemat I've been working on with the same cat print fabric. And this one's been pieced together with the different fabrics and then, you know, has some different variety of lines going on. So just an example of what you can do. And there's tons of other things too. So it's really a fun way to make something fun for a gift or for yourself. And I hope you guys enjoyed this, and thank you for watching.